So we're walking around with 3-year-old conclusions of who we are. We can be a grown adult, have our own company, our own family and everything like that. But our 3-year-old inside is like, no, remember, you're not good enough. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's right.
All right, we're getting the party started, right? Welcome to another episode of New Age Human. We are back with Dr. Ursula Lentini. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming on again.
Thank you. I love hanging out with you. It's like getting on a boat and going out to sea every time we talk. So happy to
Right?
be here.
Unless you have motion sickness, right? So we wanted to dive in. We had a conversation and we wanted to dive into your doctorate of consciousness studies. And there's three main things you wanted to go into. But before we go into that, this is the first time I'm hearing about a doctorate in consciousness studies. Can you kind of go into how that happened and like what do you have to do for that?
Yes, my pleasure. So when I was on the spiritual path, which has pretty much been my whole life, I tried to do mainstream, but this was always in the background, and I love learning and studying. So I said, well, I'm never going to get academic accolades for any of this. This is just my own stuff, and I'm putting tons of hours in here. But so what? So what? I don't care. And my
Mm.
mom's like, you should be a doctor, honey. You're so smart. You should be a doctor. And I'm like, I'm healing people, mom. Like, that counts. Like, that's good. So over the years, I've accumulated a lot of hours. I have a ministry, so I'm recognized. My ministry hours are logged and all of that. And I've done
Okay.
8 years of study, like formal study, books and papers and writing and talks and all of that. And then 8 years of service, which is active duty, if you want to call it that. And then I have I've done over 5,000 healing sessions that don't even count in the realm of doctorate. So that's even on the
Wow.
side. So my doctorate is all academic studies. So it's actual hours logged in studies, in papers, and so on. I have a teacher in California, and he said, hey, student body, you can get bachelor's and master's and doctorate if you take this class. We'll evaluate your work, and we'll I don't know, quantify, what counts
Hmm.
as hours and done. So he comes back and he says, Ursula, you qualify as a doctorate. And I'm like, I think you made a mistake there, and and he's like, no, no, no. Oh, it's a whole committee. It's not just me. And you submitted everything
Mm.
that you've done. So, and I did a whole show called The Way of the Spiritual Path, and that's 27 episodes. So as you know, there's some work behind that. And they
Yeah.
counted those as hours as well, because it's putting out, it's intelligent study, it's, original material, all of that stuff. And then this last class was 300 hours, papers every week. And the thesis was you could make a movie, you could write a book and all of that. So I wrote a book and, had it edited and all professional and everything. And was one of the star pupils because I'm the furthest one out there. And then this class here, it was a whole year-long program. And it was the crossroads of spirituality meets quantum physics. So I've already
Okay. I
done
love
quite a
that.
bit. Yeah, I've done quite a bit of study in quantum. So I understand it. And it, spiritually speaking, we get it, right? Scientifically speaking, there's better language around it. So those two worlds came together, and it was like very, very cool.
Okay. So you have like years of study and 5,000. I just want to make sure everybody remembers that 5,000 technically off the books of healing, right? Because that's just
Well,
before you started getting
yeah, I
into,
couldn't say off the books because it's so legit, right? But
yeah.
it's
Well, yeah.
5,000 sessions, but it doesn't even count in my doctorate.
Okay. That's what I meant by off the
Yeah.
books, like off the
Yes.
doctorate books, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe, I don't
It's
know.
just a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
I know a lot. I know a lot. People say to me, you're the busiest person I know. And you think as a spiritual person, I'd be laying around meditating all day, which
Right.
I do, right? I really do. But I knock it out because I'm really excited about life and I like to learn and I like to share, I like to give. So I've got there's a lot going on with me.
You know what? The thing I like too is that you have a lot of energy, and with healing, I know that um it takes energy sometimes out of you, and some people do it right. Some people do, use their energy. They use source energy, and so it's like for anybody out there that wants to get into it, that's hesitating. Um, Here's a prime example of someone that's happy, very energetic, very exciting as a person to have a conversation with, but they're not drained from having a very busy life of helping a lot of people with their health, especially with all those years under your belt. So I think that's pretty cool. Um,
And that's Pranic Healing,
Something
our
that popped up,
last
and
yep, our last show
yeah,
that, we did. We probably barely got to Pranic Healing because we have so much great
yeah,
conversation, you and I. But Pranic Healing is teaching people who are natural healers or somebody who doesn't even believe in anything can come in and learn the
mm,
technique. So people will come in, they have a family member who's sick, they'll come in and they'll learn the teaching, and they're like, "I don't know what all this stuff is, but I'll just do it," and then the person gets better.
yeah,
So
that's
that's
awesome.
using source energy. So basically, source energy is coming through the healer and using that. Where if you don't follow directions and you don't understand the technology behind it, yeah, people naturally heal, and then their whole system gets drained, and then lots of people healers will take on the sickness of the person they're
Hmm.
healing, which is it's can actually happen in the laws of energy. And that's why Master Chokuksui pranic healing is like, no, you need to do this, 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 this. But you have an understanding. And then you're like, oh, okay, now I get it.
You I wanted to go back a little bit, um, before we get into the actual um conversation of the day. Have you seen the movie Ant-Man?
No.
Oh my god. Totally recommend it. I know I'm not sure how into shows, movies, and whatnot, because there's a lot of subliminal messages going on in there. But Ant-Man is interesting because more recent movies, they go into the quantum realm. And
Ah,
so I was thinking of you because I'm like, so like what do you think? Like how do they do it? What is your perception of someone literally learning about that? And then a movie trying to depict that. And a lot of times these movies, they know a little bit more than what you think,
oh,
because
yeah.
if you know your stuff and then you
Oh,
watch it, you're
yeah.
like, they're touching on stuff that took years of research for myself to
Yes.
even understand what they're showing me,
Yes.
So I think you would appreciate that, because the more recent show or movie that's coming out, I'm not sure if it's out yet, but um they go into the realm and there's like a whole universe, like cities, and I'm like, "Oh my god." So you pop that movie popped in, and I was having a hard time paying attention to the rest of the conversation because I'm like, "Wow, this would be cool for you to see that." So I don't know if you're open to seeing that. I'm very curious
Absolutely.
on
No.
your
Yes.
yeah,
Is
yeah, yeah.
Ant-Man a part of the Marvels?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I watched I don't have a TV, I've not had TV in, I don't know, 20 years or something, so and I don't really go to movies and all of that,
Mhm.
but Doctor Strange, I loved it because it's so
Mm.
metaphysical and so like, "Oh,
Mhm.
oh, oh, I know what's happening." And then
Yeah,
my
yeah.
neighbor, my friend, she's like, "Oh, come watch these." So then we watch all the Marvel movies, in a sequence, so and I'm studying, I'm watching the film, but I'm also like, "Oh, and I just said yesterday, so they said that same family said, "Oh, did you watch this thing? The people have superpowers and they're against the robots." I forgot what the film was. And I
Yeah.
said, "Well, you know what? We're made of trillions of cells, and each cell has atoms. And the atom bomb, all the atom bomb was this few atoms, and they figured out how to split them, and that gigantic problem happened. We have tremendous amounts of power inside of us that we have not been taught. And what if we could break the code and have these superpowers that are
Mhm.
natural, that are innate within us? Like
Mhm.
they always say in the metaphysical realm, if you can conceive it, you can experience it.
Mhm.
And then I watched these guys on the rails and stuff like that. And they're jumping, like they jump from a building and they land and then they jump over a river. And it's like a human feat of like, oh my God. And then the dancing people, they just do these amazing things with their bodies. And I'm like, see, we're just touching.
I love that subject. Maybe that could be another episode of human potential. I'm all about it.
Yeah.
I'm all about it. So today we wanted to go over internal family systems, and just to kind of highlight what we're going to get into. One is our body keeps score. It's a somatic record, so we can go into what is a somatic record, and then two, there's more than one voice in our head, and three, we can turn a monologue into a dialogue, which sounds to me like you're talking to yourself, but we can dive into the first step. So our body keeps score. It's a somatic record. And so what is a somatic record?
I'm so glad you asked. So speaking of movies, internal family systems is kind of a misnomer. It's hard to understand. Like, what does that mean? I don't like
Hmm.
my family, like and I'm like no,
Oh
no, it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
that.
Let's get into that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. And it's like this little family inside of you because the guy who created this model called Dick Schwartz, he is a regular psychologist. So they have different terms for different ways of practicing. So it's like uh, uh, a play on the terms of in the psychology world.
Okay.
So, um, the system is like, how does a family work in a system? Like, okay, the dad has all the power, the mom's always complaining, the kids are the underdogs. That's like a little model of the system. But there's a system inside of us, and we have to kind of work with our system. So if you think of emotions and then preferences and then family patterns and habits and addiction, you can see all the systems that are at
Okay.
play. And then how do you regulate? So somatic means an emotional system that has moved into the physical realm, and then there's a chronic condition. So
Okay.
finally, right, the medical media, the medical languaging has caught up with the spiritual realm. I feel like we're such the leaders on the spiritual realm, and then like the medical, like,
Almost
oh,
got it.
we figured out. Yeah, exactly. Like, we figured out that stress is the number one cause of all disease.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's about time.
Welcome.
Yeah. Here's a gong, here's some sound music, they play a bowl for you.
It is very funny when I hear like, some some commercial or some like social media pop up saying, scientists have figured out, and then it's just something that's like, duh, like, okay, yes, yes. I did not know we were that far behind.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now I know where we are,
yeah.
and I'm a little bit more hopeful. Very cool. Very cool.
Right, right, exactly. So if you think about it, so, think of someone and they're having so much stress and the stress becomes chronic. Whether it's their job or they have a child who's sick or the finances aren't making it or, something. And there's stress and stress and stress and stress. What happens? You don't sleep, your digestion goes off, you can't think straight, you know, uh, you're quick to temper, so your heart, is having stress, you're not
Mhm,
breathing regularly, so now you're just like this, your immune system takes a
mm.
beating, your cortisol levels, right, in your adrenal glands. So we have
Sounds
our
like a
kid.
lot of people.
Yeah, but if you just think you just take it and you just break it down a little bit, you're like, "Ah." So when we have that much stress, it's gonna show up in our body. People get headaches. So all of these things, if the stress doesn't go away and they're not managing it, of course it's gonna be chronic, right? Because a big problem with females is the
Mhm.
motorcycles. Can you hear them? Sorry, I'm outside.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, good.
The women, so men have 14 times the amount of testosterone than women do in their bodies, right?
14%.
14 times.
Times, okay.
So if a woman has 1 unit of testosterone, a man will have 14 more of those, 14 more units. I don't know what the numbers are exactly.
That's a big difference. Okay, cool.
Huge, okay, huge. But to me, that's why men carry anger because they have if in general, men have more anger than women, and I'm grateful and thank you for all men in the world that carry anger. And I think that's the design because if women carried as much anger as men do, we would hurt our children. Like
Yeah,
that's not a good thing. So the
I
universe
think
is
that's
like,
the,
we better give
patience
the
factor, right?
guys, yeah, the guys all the anger. So the girls like, I don't know, we know which century that got regulated or if it came in that way. But anyway, it's a brilliant study that men have more anger, and anger and testosterone are equal, right? Because
Okay.
it's the aggressiveness and it's the protection. So that's fine in the animal kingdom, right? With saber-tooth tigers and all of that, and then raising of the children. But when the women go into the men's work world, right? And by 10:30, if it's like, competition and then stress and all of that, women are tanking out and the men are just carrying on.
Taking
Even
out meaning running out of, testosterone juice to keep up with the crazy, not crazy, but just that
the
high
demand.
level of demand. Interesting. Very
So
interesting.
so what happens is they start tapping out their adrenal glands because the
Uh,
adrenal glands produce cortisol.
would
So
you
then
say
go ahead.
that that would mean that women are more susceptible to high levels of caffeine intake because of that?
Yeah, they're trying to keep up. So
That's
they're
very
probably more medicated as far as can't sleep at night, right? Sleeping is a huge problem in America. Pandemic has calmed it down a little bit, but it was a big problem because of the stress level. If you've noticed, everything was ramping up and everyone's like just crazy. I was at an event the other day and my friend David's like, oh, that guy's a little slow. And I said, no, he's not slow at all. He's normal. We're all on anxiety. And he's like, oh, yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's funny. It's like,
Yeah.
you're driving at, like, 90 miles an hour, and then you get off the highway, and everybody's just like, "Womp, womp," and you're like, "Well, everybody's so slow." Especially, isn't everybody really slow when you're in a rush,
Yeah.
quote, unquote? I
Yes.
think that was the exact analogy. Everybody's just
Yes.
really slow, like, "No, no, 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 you're
You're
up
the
there
one.
right now."
Yeah, ramped up.
Wow.
So they tank their cortisols down, like so the testosterone runs out, they hit their cortisol, their adrenals that produce cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And then they go to the doctors the doctor's like, "Oh yeah, your um adrenal glands are shot." Like there's nothing left. They've overpumped. And it takes several years for a woman to get her adrenal glands back and going. So, and the adrenal glands are a part of the immune system. So she's always fatigued and like, oh, and so she's just willpowering her life. And it's not a working model. So that's somatic, right? Somatic means and then Louise Hayes, if you don't know, do you know Louise Hayes?
No.
Check it out. All your people watching should check it out. Louise Hayes came out, I don't know, she probably hit her like prime in the 80s, but she's probably been doing this for 20 years before that, as usual, that overnight success that's
Yeah,
20
yeah.
years to wing. Louise Hayes was able to study ancient texts and not anatomy and all that. And she was able to put the emotion with the organ. So, like,
Ooh, okay.
if the
So
liver's
she
gone,
pioneered that, kind of.
she commercialized it, let's say that, because 'cause I'm sure it wasn't her that, you just always find these ancient texts and then you pull it forward and you do testing and you figure it out. Um, so, like, the lungs are inspiration, you're not
Okay.
the heart is heartache, I mean, that's not a hard one.
Yeah.
The liver is this, the kidney's that. So you can look it up and say like, "Oh, I have this issue, my physical issue," and you could look it up and find the emotional cause, and I'm telling you very often it is right on target because 'cause I'll do that with my clients. They'll be like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Yep."
Wow.
So that's
Is
the
there
somatic.
Okay. It's very interesting because that will everything's connected and everybody has a different way of identifying these things. We are a mirror of our internal systems. So, I mean, you look at the hands, you look at the eyes. The eyes are pretty insane too. I saw that becoming a thing when I needed eye surgery just because of stress. And you can look at the eye and it's just like a map, like rings on a
Iridology.
tree. And yeah, yeah, that was pretty cool. So you're reminding me of that stuff that is just very deep. And it's like it's almost like our bodies are a bunch of windows and people are seeing a window and then they're like, wait a minute, I see stuff in that window. I see you, I see your issues, whether it be your hands, whether it be your eye, whether it be your
Y
physical
your
body,
your
whether yeah,
tongue. So I iridology, that's one of the first things I studied when I was 18.
nice.
So it's a map. So they'll show, like, there's the pupil in the middle, and then all around here, the iris has, like, this area is your, legs, this area is this is the
Yeah.
heart, and then the first ring will be the organs, the second ring will be the physical structure. So, I went and got a reading, and the guy's like, "Oh, you're a model. Did you get your nose done?" I'm like, "How dare you? No, I didn't get my nose done. I'm only 18. Like, what's going on here?" And then
Yeah.
he's like, "No, no, no. It's like it's all here. Everything's here. I'm not making it up. Like, I see that was a break in your nose." And I'm like, "I don't know." He's like, "Did you do
Whoa.
sports?" I'm like, "No, I'm kind of clumsy." And he's like, "Okay." So then we did the thing. He gave me some supplements, and I went home. A couple days later, I'm like, "Oh my god, I fell down the stairs when I was 2 years old, and I did fracture my nose."
No
Oh,
way.
yeah, this stuff really works. And then, the hands and the feet, even the ears, and acupressure, acupuncture, that Chinese medicine, they're like,
Mhm.
"Okay, pinch here, and this will help your stomach, or do this, and it'll help you sleep." And, so they've known that all along. Skin,
Wow.
you can read a skin and say, "Oh, your digestion's not working," or whatever. And then the tongue, even, you can stick your tongue out and, like, "Oh, you have a crack here, that means that organ's not working," like that. So it's all
Mm.
physically connected, and then somatically connected, right back to the stress. So if somebody has a tremendous grief and they just haven't gotten over the sadness of the person that they lost, it'll show up in one of their organs.
Wow. Okay. We hit that point hard, and that's trying to hard not to keep going because that is so interesting.
It
I didn't
is.
it's interesting to, like, know that I've dove a little deep into those things. I don't even know if that makes sense, a little deep, but basically I just dove into those type of things, and it has a name, it has a category, it has people know about it, and that's pretty cool. I did have a question though. For those people that are venturing into that, or I mean, what are your thoughts on people that may hesitate to go into this type of practice because they're worried about getting uh shunned or from the medical community or just silenced somehow, like do you have any type of advice because you are active in that community?
Yes.
What would you say to that?
I have a young lady who I work with, and she's going into the medical she goes to medical school, and she's full on, prayer, meditation, goes to temple all the time, like, calm
Yeah.
vegetarian, like she's the whole committed to this line, and she's going in that line. And the work is so hard, and the way they run the schools and everything are very, wrong. Uh, so she's like, it's people act so foolish, because she's
Yeah.
such the clean way. So she is going from, like, the back door, and she's gonna go through the schooling, and then when she gets her degree, she's gonna integrate. So
Okay.
for in pranic healing, for instance, we say we, are not doctors, we don't diagnose, we don't touch our clients, because we don't wanna cross into their realm, because anything that goes into their realm and is successful, they're gonna take it out. So we've learned over centuries, like, just be quiet. So we kind of stay outside the circle, and we act normal, and we don't, like, fight the establishment. And then people come to us because that has
Mm,
not been working for them. So they come and they find us. So that's how we do it. That's the safe way to continue doing your work. Because if we start rah, 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 We're a target and they're going to take us out.
I like how you're like, giggling. It's where it's how things are going right now, and I like the idea of or the energy of being the change because people will make their decisions. So it's almost like you are being the change and empowering people to make their decisions. And there's
Yes.
more power in that because you're
Yes.
creating a natural flow instead of swimming upriver. You're just
Yes.
kind of making another river that could have more potential force, and they're just kind of skipping streams, so to speak. So that's pretty
Exactly. You're
cool.
you're giving them a choice that they knew is the original one, because we know what's the right thing to do, John. We know, right? And
Yeah,
then
we
if
do.
we look hard enough to say there's got to be a better way, there's got to be a better for for people to parent. There's got to be a better way for couples to get along. There's got to be a better way to make money and not lose your mind. There's got to be a
Hmm.
better way to not have a giant house and all these expensive and stressed out families. Like, why don't we live more simply? Why does everybody
Hmm.
have to have a new car every time? Like, no,
Hmm.
there is a better way, and it's just how can we make a better choice? So if we offer a better choice, and then let the people come who's looking for a better choice, then it's there. We're not taught to look for a better choice. We're taught for commercialism and big pharma and so on and so forth. But that's just marketing. And see, once we understand the systems that are at play, then we can work in the system. We don't have to fight the system. We can be like, okay, that's the system, and these are the choices I'm making.
Well said. Well said. Well, speaking of going crazy, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, the second thing we were going to go into is there's more than one voice in our head. And I know that in just casual conversations, I say to people, hey, we're all a little bit crazy. I like to talk to myself. Who doesn't talk to themselves? But maybe you can dive a little bit deeper into how that ties in with internal family systems. I guess you're talking to your personal family in your head. I
Right.
don't know.
Yes. So it is hilarious to me, right? Because of all the things I know and all the dimensions that kind of realm um, that everybody talks to themselves in their head. Everybody. And nobody talks about all the talking.
Yeah. Ah, that's true.
You know what I mean? Like everyone's like all day long, some worse than others, right? And if you have ADHD, it's like how you can watch a recording and you put it on 1.75 speed.
Mm-hmm.
The ADD people, it's like that. It's like all their thoughts are on hyperspeed and then they jump around like on a computer board or something. It's
I,
so
I, I,
anxiety,
yep.
right? They have their own, like if you could, how you can tap in and listen to a heartbeat of a frog or something, you can just
Yeah.
listen to different, if you can tap in.
It reminds me of I'm a very big movie person. I grew up watching a lot of TV. So I that like my mind pulls up like scenes to explain something, and I'm thinking about The Matrix,
Yes.
and there's one scene where he's in this room and there's just hundreds of TVs of him having different reactions to what is being
Yes.
said. And I'm
Yes.
like, if you
Yes.
plugged into someone's mind, you would see all that craziness.
Yes. Yes. The Matrix is one of my favorite movies. Like the other ones, they're putting 4 movies in 1 movie, and you're like, "What's going on?"
Yeah.
That was too much for me. Um, but yes, so back to the systems, what I was explaining earlier, we have an emotional system going on, we have a mental, we have a family
Mhm.
inherited thing, we've got addictions going on, we have insecurities, and then traumas on top of all of that, right? So if anybody had, like, there was a car accident or somebody died or they had to move so the trauma, just like the grief that I mentioned, it'll embed itself, but the human body and our mental capacity is amazing because we are so adaptable. So I'll hear stories and I'm like, "Oh my god, how are you, like, going day to day with all of those things that you're carrying
Mhm.
within you?" And not only carrying, suppressing. You see
Yeah.
those kids in the grocery store and they're having a tantrum on in the aisle on the floor, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, how do we evolve from that to like just walking around, like everything's fine, everything's fine, because that's like more of a natural state, right? Like, the only thing we have left is car rage, like road rage. That's the only inkling of
Yeah.
like, the kid having a meltdown because they can't have their candy,
In your
cereal.
imagination, I mean, again, another movie type reference where you see those movies where all of a sudden this person just stabs somebody like 5 times. You're like, "Oh my god," and then it just no, that was their thoughts. They're just smiling with no with no sign that they want to stab you right now. And I'm like, I mean, if I think like this, who else is thinking like that? So you're saying these different traumas, these different systems are manifesting as voices sometimes, images
Well,
sometimes, and we're
okay,
managing that in the background?
yeah, we're managing it. But what happens is, so like here, like for instance, my lighting wasn't working this morning. I have a usual setup, and then it was very harsh lighting, and oh, terrible. I'm like, oh my god. So then I'm like, oh my god, what about this? What about that? What about this? Okay, do this. Hey, you're running out of time. Oh my god, he's gonna think you're late. Oh no, no, do it right. So there's all these thoughts, and I think they're one voice saying all of these things. No, this is where the one, you know, turning monologue into dialogue. So one part is managing the time and saying you're running late, everything. Another part is like, you look terrible. You can't look terrible on camera. And then another part is like, I'll find a solution. Come on, let's figure it out. Right. So I have three parts of me talking all at the same time, and they're just all okay. So throughout any given day, throughout a 5-minute period, if you really tuned in, you would be like, who's talking in my head?
Mhm.
Which part of me is talking? Is that an emotional response? Is that a critical part of me? Is that poor me? You never do it right. Is that, who is that? And then each part of us basically says the same thing all the time. So if you think of like a audio, um, panel, okay, the DJs, right? So a DJ,
Yeah.
he'll be like, boop, 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 boop. So he puts that on and then he'll go, do, 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 do. And then he puts that on. So
Yeah.
each of those tracks are voices and they're all talking at the friggin' same time. But if you slow the system down and be like, okay, who's talking and what's your agenda and why are you being so harsh on me? That's why people don't talk about all the talking because it's not very kind.
I hear the kitty.
Yeah. She's like, what's going on? So,
You know what? You made my brain start going a lot of different places to understand what you're saying. And I'm thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, a couple of things. One, that as you get older, you have more systems that you create subconsciously. Let's say voices, let's say emotions, I say programs would be like a person, a personality. And when you go through one trauma, something pops up to kind of help you walk through that. And then you go through another experience. And then it's almost like you have a crowd of people helping you because they came about, people
yes.
as in programs, they came about because you went through these different challenges. And then when you're trying to make all that work and it does work, it's almost like when you say music, I think of colors, but you have these people and then turn into instruments to create the, I guess, sympathy, symphony of your personality and what you share with other people. But then what's the difference between that and somebody that is quiet, present, and flowing with life?
Yes. 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 Okay. Yes. So, okay. Say somebody, because I'm thinking of two of my godchildren who have been through the worst out of the thousands of stories I've heard. They've had
Mm,
the worst lives so far. And they're both calmer than most people because when you figure some stuff out, like all the trauma has caused them to sit way back and say, well, what's the point?
Hmm.
Right? Why am I doing this? How come this is happening? Why are people so mean? What's the point? What's the point? And then they come to like a spiritual conclusion, like, oh, we're just having an experience and everything's just an experience. If I don't react to it emotionally, I don't have to get all upset and go down a rabbit hole. I'm just going to understand that everything's just an experience. And then it gets all quiet because these parts are ego parts of us and
Yeah.
they're vying for our attention because they're trying to keep us safe. But if you believe in God or believe in a higher power, or understand that there's a universal consciousness of energy that's beating our heart and breathing our lungs that ego can't even begin to touch. Like the ego, as loud as it is and obnoxious as it is, it can't beat our heart once. So when I turn to the ego and I'm like, look, you think you're all that? Can you beat my heart? Can you breathe my lungs? It'll be like, and I'm going, okay, man, be quiet. Go sit down. Go sit down
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Sit in the corner, stare at the wall.
Yeah. The eagle's like, oh, she found me out. I'm like, yeah, but I'll take care of you. But see that
Interesting.
image behind you.
Yeah. This thing.
Okay, so see the black line, for instance. Say that's the
If you're
trauma.
listening, she's pointing to a poster behind me that looks like a cut through of a geode, where you have like a bunch of lines and it looks like rivers and stuff.
Yeah, so there's a dark line, and then after that, there's a series of lines around that, kind of tracing it in different colors and shades. So the dark line is the trauma, and then each line is an adaptation, right? Like, I'm just going to cover it up. I'm just going to soothe myself. I'm just going to be more alive. I'm just going to fit in with social models and have regular conversations by hyper studying everybody else and acting like them. Right? But the
Yeah.
trauma's always there, buried underneath all the other layers. So when we do the internal family systems, we skip all the other layers and go straight to the trauma and soothe the trauma so you don't have to adapt so much because of it.
And so these guys, what, they just kind of fade away, like the
Yeah,
coverings, so to
they're
speak?
not as necessary. So they can relax. They've been working so hard to, compensate for the original trauma.
That's very cool. That's a perfect example of going to the root cause and then all the symptoms starting to fade away.
Yes.
Wow. And for anybody that's listening, we have been talking about after there's more than one voice in your head, the monologue into the dialogue, talking to the different layers, going back into the thing that started all those, which is the trauma in the past. Is there any suggestion on how someone can start that journey, or is it very hard and you need like a lot of guidance because that's a crazy boat ride?
It is a crazy boat ride. You can start. So the beginner of just saying like, oh, like a awakening. Back to movies. Inside Out is a
Yes.
fantastic movie that the internal family systems people were in on the writing. Like somebody came up with the idea and then they brought them. They probably were uh, a client of internal family systems, like, oh my God, I got to make a movie. But then they pulled in the professionals to make it accurate. So IFS, internal family systems, if you want to really understand that, is inside out. And they have these little characters. So one was anger and another, I forgot the other three. And they were all little people, little, animated characters, and it looks like it's a kid's movie, but no way. It's very, very, very deep. So you can really study that and then start understanding who's talking now and where's that voice coming from? Is it an emotional thing? And a lot of things. So say it's not a trauma. Say that black line in the poster behind you is a belief. So 3, 4 years old, we go through a development phase where we're like, oh, we're not all connected. Oh, so then, why are these people acting mean to me? Oh, well, I must not be good enough. Oh,
Mm.
okay. So we're walking around with 3-year-old conclusions of who we are. We can be a grown adult, have our own company, our own family, and everything like that. But our 3-year-old inside is like, no, remember, you're not good enough. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's right. But
It's
you're not
interesting
even
how
hearing
yeah,
that
okay.
conversation because it's so normalized that you don't even pay attention to it anymore.
I can see how people can be triggered in their response to something that they haven't had to deal with in a long time. Grown people go into tantrums because it is something that they haven't had to deal with, and especially if you live a very cushy life, and some people say, oh, you're being a snowflake and you're easily shattered, because your systems are so, I guess, not advanced, and the 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 solutions are just very youthful and not tenured. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, 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 yes. So then
So do
you're
you
asking,
feel
who's
Sorry, go ahead.
talking now? Sorry. And then this is where the monologue, because it feels like there's a monologue, even though it's several, symphony of voices all talking at the same time. It sounds like a monologue to the observer, right? Because there is a part of us that is quiet, that's observing all the time. So when I gave the example of my godson, he's an observer, even on the Enneagram scale, he's qualified
Mm.
as an observer. So he's observing all of his thoughts and emotions. And he's like, oh, look at that. Oh, there I go. I'm tripping again. Okay, 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 okay. And you're just watching. Now, how can you turn a monologue into a dialogue? You can say, I disagree. That's not my reality. Oh, that's what you're saying, but I'm not going to buy into it. Why don't you calm down now? you know, so you can have commentary back to that thing because you're, like I said, you're closer to the heartbeat, whatever that is, that divine energy that's flowing through you, that resource and source, life source, intellectual energy, and talk back to because all those parts are egoic, born parts. So when
Mm.
the authority inside of you is talking and like, you know what, we're not going to freak out about this. Then the part that's freaking out, like, huh? What's that?
Yeah, if you don't know you're the observer, you're gonna think you're each thought, which is very scary, very scary. Is there Would you say meditation helps you strengthen the observer?
Yes,
Okay, cool.
because meditating is observing the thoughts. You're just observing them, you're not engaging them.
Mm. And I
Meditation
know
is
that
working towards
yeah.
emptying the mind, and the mind is all that chatter.
Wow. You gave more of a deep need for meditation for anybody. I know people, and some people I'm thinking of specifically, and I'm asking questions for these people because I'm totally going to say, "Hey, listen to this," because we just had a conversation about it. And I don't like promoting movies, but In and Out is huge about it with these thought systems arguing, and there's just one mic and one control system, and they're fighting for that one control system, beating each other up in whatever personality that they are, which is very comical. And to think that you have, and there's shows too where there's just like it goes into the head, and you just see people walking around arguing, like, so what are we gonna tell them to do? But reality is, you're there watching them figure out what to tell you. Like, hello, hello, I hear everything you're saying. I don't like it. What's freaky is, do you have a simple definition of what you believe or understand to be the observer?
The observer is a pseudo self because the truest self, our true self, has no agenda, no preference. You want to ruin your life? Go ahead. I still love you. You want to be the best person ever? Go ahead. I still love you. And there's no need for it to talk. Like it doesn't have anything to say. There's a isness. It just is. It just exists. So in our mind, we're like, oh, what is God? Oh, he's got to be an old wise man. Well, that's just our little mind. So we were not made in the image and likeness of God. We made God in the image and likeness of us because we have small references. Our little pea brain only
Mm,
has a capacity. So if you start talking, you know, uh, um, I don't know, chemistry with a child, the child's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So then you break it down to their level, right?
mhm.
So in our human capacity, we are only capable of understanding the universal consciousness to a certain degree. So that's why we put a person in there because we're a person. So we think God is a person. So
Right, right.
who is the observer? The observer is still, there's a still kind of an activity, right? So it's like the best part of our ego. It's still our human aspect to observe. But then behind the observer is the best, truest self, the part of us that's beating our heart and breathing our lungs, that has no agenda and has no conversation. So it's almost like hey, the boss says, but the boss isn't talking. So the observer is like our highest version of our best self. And then our self is behind us, which is just giving us life every second of the day. Keeping the planets in order, just an intellectual consciousness.
To summarize, we spoke about internal family systems, and internal family is the family in your brain, in your head, in your consciousness. And also, the body keeps score of the somatic record, and the somatic record is the body itself and the energy being stored in different organs. And you have windows to the soul, windows to the body, from your hands to your tongue to your eyes, which is nuts. Um, there's more than one voice in your head. Think about the movie In and Out, and you can either you need to realize that that is not just you, and you. It is you, but it's the more people that are talking is probably because you had more trauma, and a really good way to kind of hone in on that is meditation and empower that observer that just is not going to be phased by much, and it's just going to watch, just like you go outside and you watch a bunch of kids run into each other and cry. You're like, they did it again, you know. So that's pretty cool. And any last words that you may want to just bring up, because you feel like we kind of skated over it?
No, not that we skated over it, but we gave a lot of information, a lot of food for thought. I think in closing, I would have to say, or it's best for me to say, compassion is the key, right? Because if we're like, oh, why am I so hard on myself, or why am I such a loser, or why am I whatever? Hey, you probably went through a lot, and your adapting skills, have gotten you where you are. So have compassion. Or why is that person acting like such a jerk? Well, hey, why don't you look at them and say, what has happened to make them act that way? Right? They say hurt people, right? So if someone's hurting you, think what's going on there? Or what has happened that they have to hurt other people in order to adapt to live each day? Why is that person be so aggressive? Why is that person so shy? Why is that person so, just have compassion. We've all gone through a lot in our lives, and we're all carrying ancestral trauma that we don't even have a clue about. That's why. So if we approach ourselves when we're having a hard day, or we see other people acting like jerks, let me have some compassion. That's probably the best thing I can do.
I like it. I like it a lot. I agree 100,000%, because I've been told, how do you have so much patience with that person? And in a different way, my mother told me, there's just a lot of sick people in the world. And my mind switched from labeling people for what they did to, okay, so I wonder what happened. And you're curious. Um, so I like that compassion. I hope everybody got that message. So thanks again for coming on. If anybody is looking to find you and they want to know how they can heal their trauma, maybe quiet some of that noise in their head, how can they find you?
I made my social media very simple, Ursula Lentini. So ursulalentini.com, of course, is my website. That's the best resource. YouTube, if you want to learn more about the way I think and how I am, and Facebook, Instagram, just Ursula Lentini. Just look me up and you will find me. And I want to invite your listeners to our Tuesday night meditation that we do every Tuesday at 7 Eastern Time, online or in person. And we bless the planet with loving kindness, and that's a part of the pranic healing teachings. And it's a guided meditation, which is the easiest one to do. It's an active meditation where we're participating because we're blessing the planet. And it's a healing meditation. So the more you do it, the more you get healed.
Ooh, okay. So there's a double benefit, benefiting the planet, benefiting yourself, and you get that meditation aspect to enhance your observer. I like that. Cool. Thanks for sharing it. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and your background, so we have a even deeper understanding of where you're coming from and all the time and energy you put into all the work you've done. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, and if anybody's listening still at the very end, please give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to the podcast, and if you're watching the video, leave a comment, message. We would like to hear some feedback. If you saw those movies and you wanted to say something like, "Oh, I knew it was real," go ahead, let us know, and share with anybody, share with everybody, because this is a lot of very good information that we all deal with on a daily basis. Thank you for coming on again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.